The wind in Rio Seco did not blow so much as it scoured. It carried the grit of 3 territories, picking up sand from the baking flats of Arizona and dragging it across the jagged spine of the borderlands until it slammed into the clapboard walls of the settlement. The town was nothing more than a desperate smudge of humanity against the vast indifference of the New Mexico territory. It was a place where gaunt cattle bawled for water that tasted of iron and alkali, and where men drifted in like tumbleweeds, brittle and prone to catching fire. Anna sat on an overturned crate behind the Lucky Dollar Saloon, the rough wood biting into her thighs through the thin fabric of her ruined dress. She pulled the oversized, moth-eaten woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the heat of the late afternoon sun was still heavy enough to make the air shimmer. The shawl was gray and smelled of wet dog and tobacco, but it was a shield. It was the only thing standing between her and the eyes of the men gathering in the dirt lot. She stared at the toe of her boot. The leather was cracked, revealing the dirty stocking underneath. If she looked at her boot, she did not have to look at the horizon where the smoke had finally stopped rising 3 days ago. 3 days. It felt like 3 lifetimes. Her memory of the event was not a straight line, but a shattered mirror, reflecting jagged, bloody pieces. She remembered the sound first. Not a scream, but the thud of an arrow striking the side of the canvas wagon. Then the screaming. She remembered the smell of burning flour and the terrible, high-pitched whinny of the horses as the raiders cut them loose. She remembered her father shouting for her to run, his voice choking off into a wet gurgle that woke her up every time she closed her eyes. Strangers had found her wandering the scrub 2 days later, her skin blistered by the sun and her throat so parched she could not speak to beg for water. They had been buffalo hunters, rough men with skin like cured leather. They had given her water. Yes, but they had not taken her to the fort. They had brought her here, to Rio Seco, and sold her to Silas Vane for the price of a new saddle and a bottle of whiskey. Silas Vane now stood in the center of the lot, wiping his sweating forehead with a yellowed handkerchief. He was a round man, his belly straining the buttons of his vest, with eyes that darted like nervous flies. "Gentlemen," Vane shouted, his voice cracking against the wind, "gather round. We are not selling horseflesh today, though what I have is just as strong and twice as useful." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. There were perhaps 20 men, a mixture of drift riders, prospectors with dust in their beards, and ranch hands looking for a way to spend their monthly pay. They smelled of stale beer, unwashed bodies, and expectation. Anna felt the numbness spreading through her chest. It was a cold, heavy weight, like a stone dropped into a well. She told herself she was already dead. The girl named Anna, who had sewn a quilt for her marriage chest and memorized the Psalms, had died with her family in the ashes of the wagon train. The thing sitting on the crate was just a husk. If she was a husk. It did not matter what they did to her. "Step up, girl," Vane said, snapping his fingers. "Let them see you." Anna did not move. Her muscles refused to obey. Vane hissed a curse under his breath and grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into a bruise that was already blooming there from yesterday. He hauled her to her feet. The sudden movement made the world spin, gray and dizzying. "Stand up straight," Vane commanded. He yanked the shawl down from her shoulders. Anna flinched, instinctively trying to cover herself, but Vane slapped her hands away. "Look at that," Vane announced to the crowd, gesturing to her. "Young, strong teeth, a bit skinny from the road. Sure, but she will fatten up on beans and cornbread. She can cook, she can sew, and she can keep a man warm when the norther blows in." A man in the front row took a step forward. He was tall, wearing a long duster coat and a hat with a silver band. His face was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, but his eyes were flat and cruel. This was Caleb Dorsey. Anna knew his name because she had heard the other men whispering it with a mixture of fear and deference. He owned the largest spread of land in the valley, and he owned the sheriff, the judge, and anyone else who wanted to stay alive in Rio Seco. Dorsey looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on the tear in her dress where the white skin of her knee was visible. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "She looks used up." "Silas," Dorsey said, his voice a lazy drawl. Vane laughed nervously. She is fresh, Mr. Dorsey, just a little dusted, a wash and a meal. And she will be a prize. Start the bidding, then. Someone shouted from the back, I have got thirsty cows waiting. Vane rubbed his hands together. Do I hear $10? $10 for a wife who will never talk back? $5, a miner shouted, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. I have 6, another man called out. Anna stared past them, fixing her eyes on the heat distortion rising from the tin roof of the livery stable. I am stone, she thought. I am the dust. I am nothing. $10, Dorsey said. The crowd quieted. When Caleb Dorsey bid, sensible men stopped talking. I have $10 for Mr. Dorsey, Vane said, looking relieved. Do I hear 15? 12? A brave or drunk cowboy tried 15. Dorsey countered immediately, turning his head to glare at the interrupter. The cowboy looked down at his boots and stepped back. $15 going once. Vane cried out, sweating profusely now. $15 for a lifetime of comfort. It was then that the silence at the edge of the crowd shifted. It was a different kind of silence than the hush of fear Dorsey commanded. It was a heavy, watchful stillness. A figure detached itself from the shadow of the livery stable. He had been standing there the whole time, unnoticed, blending into the wood and the shade like a phantom. He walked forward into the sunlight, and the crowd parted instinctively, men stumbling over their own feet to get out of his way. He was an Apache. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, wearing a faded calico shirt and buckskin trousers that had seen many miles but were mended with care. His hair was black as a raven wing, braided heavily on either side of his face, and a headband of red cloth was tied around his forehead. Across his back was a repeating rifle, the wood stock scarred but the metal gleaming with oil. But it was his face that stopped the breath in Anna's throat. It was a hard face, composed of planes and angles that looked as if they had been hewn from the red rock of the canyon walls. His skin was the color of burnished copper, and his eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly unreadable. The townsfolk began to mutter. The word savage hissed through the air like steam escaping a valve. A woman watching from the back porch of the general store gathered her children and pushed them inside. The Apache stopped 10 feet from the crate where Anna stood. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Silas Vane. He looked only at her. His gaze was not hungry like the others. It was intense, searching, as if he were looking for something broken inside a machine to see if it could be fixed. Sheriff Brady, a man with a walrus mustache and a star pinned to a shirt that had not seen soap in a month, stepped off the boardwalk. He rested his hand on the butt of his pistol. Now see here, Brady said, his voice blustering but uncertain. You move along, boy. This is not for you. The Apache ignored him. He looked at Silas Vane. $20, the warrior said. His English was accented, the vowels flattened and hard, but it was clear. The sound of his voice was deep, resonating in the sudden vacuum of the lot. Vane blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. You, what? $20, the Apache repeated. Gold! He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a coin. It flashed in the sun, heavy and yellow, a $20 gold piece, likely taken from a soldier or a raid. But gold all the same. The crowd erupted. You cannot sell a white woman to an Indian, the miner shouted. It is against God and nature. Run him off! Sheriff, shoot him! Caleb Dorsey took a step toward the Apache, his face darkening with rage. He looked as if he had been slapped. This is a white man's town, Dorsey snarled. You take your filth and you ride out, or we will drag you out behind a horse. The Apache did not flinch. He did not even turn to face Dorsey fully. He kept his eyes on Vane, holding up the coin. Is your money only for white men? The warrior asked. Or is gold just gold? Vane looked at the coin, then at Dorsey, then back at the coin. Greed was a powerful thing, stronger than prejudice and stronger than fear. $20 was more money than Vane had seen in 6 months. Now, hold on, Vane stammered, licking his lips. There is no law says who can buy. It is an auction. Highest bidder takes the lot. You sell her to him. Silas. And you are a dead man, Dorsey threatened, his hand hovering near his gun. Sheriff Brady stepped between them. Holding up his hands, he was sweating, and he knew that if shooting started, he would likely be the first to catch a stray bullet. Easy, Caleb, easy, Brady said. Silas is right. It is an open auction. If you want the girl, bid higher. Dorsey spat on the ground. I will not pay good money to outbid a savage for what should be mine by rights. It is an insult to every decent man here. Then the bid stands at $20, Vane said quickly, snatching the coin from the Apache's hand before anyone could change their mind. Sold. She is yours. Take her and go. The silence that followed was thick with violence. Dorsey was vibrating with fury, his knuckles white on his gun belt. He stared at Anna, his eyes narrowing. It was a look of cold, calculating hatred. He was marking her. He was telling her without words that this was not over. The sheriff turned to the Apache. You have bought your goods. Now you get out of my town. You are not welcome here after sundown. And you keep that woman under control, you hear me? I do not want to hear about any trouble. The warrior nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. He walked toward Anna. Up close, he smelled of wood smoke, horse sweat, and sage. He was terrifyingly large. Anna shrank back against the invisible wall behind her, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. This was it. This was the final nightmare. She had been traded from the wolves to the bear. The warrior reached into his belt. Anna squeezed her eyes shut, expecting the knife, expecting the pain. She held her breath, waiting for the end. She felt a tug at her wrists. The rough hemp rope that Vane had used to bind her hands fell away. Anna opened her eyes. The Apache was sheathing a long hunting knife. He did not grab her. He did not drag her. He reached for a water skin slung over his shoulder, uncorked it, and held it out to her. Drink, he said. Anna stared at the water, then at him. She was confused. The script she had written in her head, the one where she was beaten, dragged, and used, had skipped a page. He nudged the skin closer to her hands. It is water. It is not poison. Her hands shook as she took the skin. She lifted it to her cracked lips and drank. The water was warm and tasted of leather, but it was the sweetest thing she had ever known. She drank until she choked, coughing as the liquid went down the wrong way. He took the skin back and corked it. My name is Taza, he said. He did not ask for her name. He simply stated his own, as if laying a foundation stone. Taza looked around the lot, his eyes meeting Dorsey's glare for a brief, dangerous second. Then he looked back at Anna. Walk with me, Taza said. It was not a command, not exactly. It was an instruction. Anna looked at the sheriff, who was chewing his mustache and watching the crowd. She looked at Dorsey, who was whispering to two of his ranch hands, his eyes fixed on Taza's back. She looked at the open desert beyond the buildings. She had no choice. She stood up, her legs wobbling, and followed him. Walking through the town was a gauntlet. Men spat as they passed. Women peered through drawn curtains, their faces pale ovals of judgment. Insults were thrown like rocks. Traitor, whore, squaw lover. Anna kept her head down, pulling the shawl so tight it hurt her fingers. She felt the shame burning her cheeks, hot and agonizing. They thought she had chosen this. They thought she was complicit in her own sale. Taza walked with a long, steady stride. He did not hurry, and he did not slow down. He walked as if the town and its people were nothing more than ghosts, insubstantial and irrelevant. They reached the edge of town where a paint horse was tethered to a hitching rail. It was a strong animal, deep-chested and alert. Taza untied the reins and mounted in one fluid motion. He looked down at her. Can you ride? He asked. Anna shook her head. I have fallen out of practice. He reached down, offering his forearm. Put your foot on mine. Swing up behind. She hesitated. To touch him was to cross a line she had been taught never to cross. To touch him was to accept that she belonged to him. But Dorsey's men were stepping off the porch of the saloon, their spurs jingling. She gripped Taza's forearm. It was hard as iron. She stepped onto his moccasined foot and swung her leg over the horse's rump, settling awkwardly behind the saddle. "Hold the belt," Taza said. She reached around his waist, her fingers gripping the worn leather of his gun belt. She could feel the heat of his body through his shirt. It was a terrifying proximity. Taza clicked his tongue, and the horse moved forward, breaking into a trot as they left the last sagging building of Rio Seco behind. They rode in silence for hours. The sun began to dip toward the jagged purple line of the western mountains, painting the sky in bruises of violet and blood orange. The wind grew colder, biting through Anna's thin dress. She shivered, pressing her face against Taza's back to escape the grit, then pulling away, remembering what he was. She was riding with an Apache, the bogeyman of every story told around the wagon fires, the monster who stole children and burned settlements. And yet, he had given her water. He had cut her bonds. They did not stop until the stars were thick and bright above them. Vast clouds of silver dust scattered across the black. Taza guided the horse into a small canyon where a shallow overhang of rock offered shelter from the wind. He dismounted and helped her down. Her legs were numb and cramped, and she nearly collapsed when her boots hit the sand. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then released her immediately. "Gather wood," Taza said, "small sticks, dry." Anna obeyed automatically. It was something to do. It was a task that kept her from thinking. She scrabbled around in the dark, finding dried mesquite branches and dead sagebrush. Taza built a small fire, striking a spark with flint and steel. The flames caught, growing into a cheerful, crackling comfort that pushed back the immense, terrifying dark. He produced a strip of dried meat and a hard biscuit from his saddlebags, breaking them in half and handing her a share. "Eat," he said. Anna sat on a flat rock near the fire, holding the food. She was starving, but her stomach was knotted tight. She looked at him across the flames. The firelight danced on his face, softening the harsh angles, making him look less like a statue and more like a man. He ate slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the ring of light. He was always watching. "Why?" Anna asked. Her voice was a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Why did you buy me?" Taza finished chewing and swallowed. He took a sip from the water skin before answering. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something behind the obsidian wall of his eyes. It was not pity. It was a deep, weary recognition. "I saw their eyes." Taza said, "The man in the coat, the fat one." "Dorsey," Anna whispered. Taza nodded. "That one. He has a sickness in his spirit. If he had taken you, he would have broken you into pieces just to see how you looked on the inside." Anna shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "But you—" Anna trailed off. "You are." "I am Apache." Taza finished for her. "Yes, and you think I bought you to be a slave, to carry my wood and scrape my hides." Anna did not answer. That was exactly what she thought. Taza tossed a twig into the fire. "In the town, you are my wife," he said quietly. "I paid the gold. I signed the paper in their minds. That is the only law they understand." He looked directly at her. "But out here, under the sky, you are not my property." Anna frowned, the confusion knitting her brow. "Then what am I?" Taza leaned back, resting his arms on his knees. "You are a life," he said. "I could not ride away and leave a life to be eaten by wolves." He said it simply, without boasting, as if spending $20 in gold, a fortune, to save a stranger was the only logical course of action. But $20. Anna said, "That is so much money." "Money is metal," Taza said, shrugging. "Metal does not bleed." He stood up and moved to his saddle, pulling off a heavy wool blanket. He tossed it to her. "Sleep," he said. "We ride early. Dorsey will not let the insult stand. He will come, or he will send men. We must be deep in the Badlands before noon." Anna caught the blanket. It was scratchy and smelled of horse, but it was thick and warm. She wrapped it around herself, lying down on the hard earth on the opposite side of the fire. Taza sat with his back to the rock wall. his rifle across his lap. He did not lie down. He tipped his hat brim low, but Anna knew he was not sleeping. She watched him through the flames. She was terrified of the desert. She was terrified of the men who might be following them. She was terrified of this silent warrior who spoke of saving lives while wearing the weapons of war. But as the heat of the fire seeped into her bones, replacing the chill of the auction lot, she realized one thing. For the first time in 3 days, no one was looking at her with cruelty. She closed her eyes, and the image of Taza standing in the dust, holding up the gold coin, played behind her eyelids. A choice. He had called it. He had chosen her. Not to own, he claimed, but to save. She did not know if she believed him. The world she knew did not contain men who saved women like her for nothing. There would be a price. There was always a price. But for tonight, the price was a fire and a blanket. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. So soft, she was sure he could not hear. The wind howled outside the canyon, lonely and cold, but the fire held its ground. Taza did not move, but the rhythm of his breathing remained steady, a quiet anchor in the spinning world. Anna pulled the blanket up to her chin, and finally, exhaustion pulling her down like a dark tide, she slept. Dawn broke over the high desert not with warmth, but with a pale, bruised light that offered no comfort against the biting chill. The air was thin and sharp, tasting of frost and dry sage. It was a silence so absolute that the snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. Taza was already moving before the first gray light touched the horizon. He moved with an economy of motion that Anna, watching from beneath the rim of her scratchy wool blanket, found unnerving. He did not stumble or yawn. He simply transitioned from stillness to action as if he were a part of the landscape waking up. He kicked dirt over the embers of their small fire, extinguishing the last meager source of heat. "Get up," Taza said. His voice was low, a rumble that seemed to vibrate in the ground. "We must move." Anna sat up, her muscles screaming in protest. The cold air slapped her face, waking her instantly from the fitful, nightmare-ridden doze she had managed. She pulled the blanket tighter, her fingers numb. "Why?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Dorsey will not sleep late." Taza answered. He was busy saddling the horses, his hands working the leather straps with practiced speed. His pride is wounded. A man like that feeds on his anger. He will be tracking us by now. The name Dorsey sent a jolt of adrenaline through her that chased away the morning sluggishness. She scrambled to her feet, the oversized shawl slipping from her shoulders. She felt exposed in the ruined dress, the fabric torn at the hem and stained with the grime of the auction lot. It was a badge of her humiliation, a garment that marked her as a victim. Taza turned from the horses and walked toward her. In his hands, he held a bundle of cloth. He shoved it into her arms. "Put these on," he said. Anna looked down at the bundle. It was a pair of canvas trousers, a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times the pattern was a ghost of a plaid, and a heavy canvas coat. "I cannot wear men's clothing," she said automatically. It was a reflex, a voice from a life that no longer existed. "The dress is a flag," Taza said, his eyes hard. "It catches on the brush, it offers no warmth, and it tells everyone who sees you that you are a white woman lost in the desert. If you want to survive, you wear the trousers." He pointed to a large boulder a few yards away. "Change behind the rock. I will watch the ridge." Anna hesitated for only a second before clutching the bundle to her chest and hurrying behind the stone. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned the dress. Peeling it off felt like peeling away a layer of dead skin. The cold air bit at her bruised flesh, making her shiver violently. She pulled on the trousers. They were too big in the waist, but long enough to tuck into her boots. The flannel shirt smelled of sage and wood smoke, a scent that was quickly becoming the smell of safety. She buttoned the coat and stepped out from behind the rock. She felt strange. The heavy fabric restricted her movement in some ways, but freed her in others. She was no longer a shape to be ogled. She was a figure wrapped in canvas and wool, indistinct and practical. Taza was standing by the horses, his back to her. He did not turn around until he heard her boots crunching on the gravel. When he looked at her, his gaze was brief and clinical, checking the fit of the gear rather than the woman beneath it. "Good," he said. "Tie the dress to your saddle. We may need the cloth for bandages or fire starter." They mounted up as the sun finally breached the horizon, flooding the desert with a harsh, blinding light that offered no warmth, only exposure. The wind picked up, scouring the land and throwing grit against their faces. The riding was harder today. Anna's body was a map of aches from the previous day's journey, and the saddle felt like a torture device. Every jolt of the horse sent a shockwave up her spine. She gritted her teeth, determined not to complain. She would not give him a reason to think she was weak. She would not give him a reason to regret his purchase. After 2 hours, Taza signaled for a halt. He circled back to where Anna was struggling to keep her feet in the stirrups. Her legs were cramping, her posture collapsing with fatigue. "You fight the horse," Taza said, bringing his mount alongside hers. "I am trying," she snapped, the pain fraying her temper. "You sit too stiff," he observed, ignoring her tone. He swung down from his saddle and approached her horse. Anna stiffened, her hand tightening on the reins. He was close now, right at her knee. The horse shifted, sensing her tension, but Taza laid a calming hand on the animal's neck. "Your stirrups are too long," he said. "You are reaching for them. It makes you bounce." He reached for the leather strap of her left stirrup. To adjust it, he had to brace her leg. His hand, large and calloused, wrapped around her calf just above the boot top. Anna stopped breathing. The touch was firm, professional, yet it burned through the canvas of the trousers. It was the first time a man had touched her in months without the intent to hurt or appraise. It was a steadying grip, an anchor. "Lift," he commanded softly. She lifted her weight, and he worked the buckle, shortening the leather. He moved to the other side and repeated the action. His knuckles brushed against her shin, a fleeting contact that sent a confusing flush of heat up her neck. It was shame, she told herself. Shame that she was so helpless she needed a savage to dress her and fix her saddle. Shame that her body reacted to his nearness not with revulsion, but with a sudden, traitorous awareness of his strength. "Try now," Taza said, stepping back. She settled her weight. The shorter stirrups allowed her to stand slightly in the saddle, absorbing the horse's movement with her knees rather than her spine. It was instantly better. "Thank you," she muttered, looking at the horse's mane. Taza swung back onto his horse. "We ride for the high country," he said, pointing toward the distant, jagged peaks that looked like teeth biting into the sky. "Where are we going?" Anna asked. "To the stronghold," he answered, "where the water runs cold and clear. My people are there." "Your people," Anna repeated, the fear creeping back into her voice. "Will they accept me?" Taza looked at the mountains, his expression darkening. "The army chases us. The settlers steal our water. We are pushed into the rocks like lizards. My people are angry. Anna, they have bled much. You are white. That is enough for many of them to hate you." "Then why take me there?" she demanded. "Why not leave me at a fort? Because the fort is where Dorsey will look." Taza said, "And the soldiers—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "The soldiers are not always saviors. In the mountains, the army's reach is long, but it is not endless. It is the only place I can guarantee you will not be sold again." He kicked his horse forward, ending the conversation. Anna followed, the ominous weight of his words settling on her shoulders. She was riding away from the world of white men, which wanted to use her, toward a world of Apache, who might want to kill her. She was suspended between two hatreds, with only the broad back of the warrior ahead of her as a shield. By midday, the heat was a physical hammer. They stopped at a dry arroyo, a twisting scar in the earth filled with dusty mesquite and sharp-bladed yucca. The wind howled through the narrow channel, a lonely, hollow sound. Taza dismounted and began to walk slowly along the dry creek bed, his eyes scanning the ground. He motioned for Anna to join him. "Look," he said, pointing to a patch of cracked mud that looked no different to Anna than the miles of cracked mud they had already crossed. "What am I looking for?" she asked, squinting against the glare. "Here," he said, tracing a faint depression with his finger. "A coyote walked here this morning. And here, a beetle." He walked further, stopping near a cluster of rocks where a scraggly willow tree clung to life. He knelt and began to dig with his knife. The earth was dry on top, but a few inches down, the soil turned dark. He scooped out a handful of wet sand and waited, slowly, agonizingly. A small pool of water began to seep into the hole. "The land speaks," Taza said quietly, looking up at her. "You see only emptiness. You see death. But the land is alive. It hides its gifts, but they are there for those who know how to ask." He cupped his hands and drank, then gestured for her to do the same. The water was muddy and tasted of earth, but it was cool. Anna wiped her mouth with her sleeve. "You talk as if the land is a person." "It is," Taza said. "It is the mother of all things. The white men. They fight the land. They try to beat it into a shape they like. They put up fences and curse the wind. That is why they die here. You must learn to move with the land." Anna, like the shadow of a hawk, she looked at him, surprised by the poetry in his rough voice. She began to look at the arroyo differently. It wasn't just a ditch. It was a hiding place, a reservoir, a map. They rode on. The terrain grew rougher, the flat desert giving way to rolling foothills littered with volcanic rock. In the late afternoon, they passed a scene that made Anna's blood run cold. It was the remains of a wagon, not fresh like hers had been, but old. The wood was bleached gray by the sun, the iron rims of the wheels rusting red. The ground around it was scorched black in a circle, though the grass had begun to grow back. Taza did not stop, but his posture stiffened. He rode past the ruin with his head high, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Anna stared at the skeleton of the wagon. She saw the broken toys of a child half buried in the sand. She saw the charred remains of a trunk. It was a mirror of her own trauma, a monument to the violence that saturated this frontier. "Who did this?" she whispered, though she knew the answer could be anything. "Bandits, soldiers, Comanches, Apaches." Taza did not answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was devoid of emotion. "Anger," he said. "Anger did this. He did not defend his people. He did not blame hers. He simply named the true killer." Suddenly, Taza pulled his horse up sharp. He held up a hand, signaling for silence. He turned his head, listening to the wind, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon behind them. Anna watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What is it?" He pointed. Far back, miles across the shimmering flats. A plume of dust was rising. It was too focused to be the wind. It was riders, moving fast. "Dorsey," Taza said, panic, cold and familiar, clawed at Anna's throat. "He is coming. He is going to take me back. Move!" Taza ordered. He did not panic. He grabbed the bridle of her horse and led them off the trail, guiding them into a narrow, twisting wash that cut deep into the earth. The walls of the wash rose high above their heads, shielding them from view. "Get down!" Taza hissed. He pulled her from the saddle. He quickly led the horses further up the wash, tying them securely to a heavy root where they would be hidden by the overhang. Then he returned to her, pushing her down into the dirt behind a cluster of sagebrush. "Stay flat," he commanded. "Do not move. Do not breathe loud." He climbed the side of the wash, moving like a lizard, silent and sure. He positioned himself just below the rim, peering over the edge through a gap in the rocks. He unslung his rifle, checked the lever, and rested the barrel on the stone. Anna lay in the dirt, her face pressed against the gritty sand. Her heart sounded like a drum in her ears. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then she heard it, the sound of hooves, the jingle of a bit, the creak of leather. They were close, so close she could hear the heavy breathing of a horse. "Spread out," a voice shouted. It was a voice she knew. It was the voice that had bid $15 for her life. "Caleb Dorsey. I lost the tracks. Boss," another man called out. "Ground is too hard here. Find them," Dorsey roared. His voice carried on the wind, thick with rage. "That redskin cannot have vanished. He has got my property." Anna trembled. Property. The word made her sick. "When I catch him," Dorsey continued, his voice dropping to a growl that was somehow louder than his shout, "I'm going to peel him slow. And the girl," he laughed, a sound that made Anna's blood freeze. "She will learn what happens when you run from Caleb Dorsey. She will learn her place." Anna bit her lip so hard she tasted copper. She wanted to scream. She wanted to bury herself in the earth. Above her, Taza was a statue. He did not twitch. His finger was on the trigger, his eye aligned with the sights. He was the only thing standing between her and the man who wanted to break her. They went north. A scout shouted from further away, "I see dust to the north." It was a trick of the wind, or perhaps a wild herd. But Dorsey took the bait. "Ride!" Dorsey yelled. "Run them down!" The thunder of hooves shook the ground, vibrating through Anna's chest. The sound faded, growing fainter and fainter until the silence of the desert rushed back in to fill the void. Taza stayed at the rim for another 20 minutes, making absolutely sure they were gone. Only then did he slide down the embankment. Anna was still lying face down, shaking. Taza knelt beside her. He did not touch her, but his presence was a heavy warmth. "They are gone," he said. Anna pushed herself up. Her face was streaked with dust and tears. "He will never stop," she whispered. "He thinks I am his." Taza looked at her, his dark eyes fierce. "You are not his," he said firmly. "You are breathing. You are standing. You are here. As long as you draw breath, you belong to no one but the Great Spirit." He stood up and offered her a hand. "Come, we must change our path. We go into the rocks where the horses cannot leave tracks." That night, they made a cold camp deep in a labyrinth of sandstone canyons. They dared not light a fire, but the cold was a physical weight, pressing down on them. Taza finally relented, digging a small pit and building a tiny fire at the bottom. Shielding the light with his body and a blanket, they sat close to the meager warmth. The adrenaline of the day had drained away, leaving Anna hollow and brittle. The fear she had swallowed for 2 days began to curdle into anger. She looked at Taza across the fire. He was cleaning his rifle, his movements rhythmic and calm. His calmness infuriated her. How could he be so still when her world was burning? "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice sharp in the silence. Taza looked up, pausing in his work. "Do what?" "Buy me," she cried out. The words tore out of her throat. "You act like a savior, but you bought me like a cow at a fair. You put money in that man's hand and led me away on a rope. How are you different from them? How are you any better than Dorsey?" The accusation hung in the air, bitter and unfair. Anna knew it was unfair, but she couldn't stop. She needed to hurt someone, and he was the only one there. "You are just another man." She spat. "You all think you can own things. You think because you have gold or a gun, you can take a life and call it yours." Taza did not yell back. He did not get angry. He set the rifle down gently on the blanket. He looked into the fire, his face etched with a sorrow so deep it silenced Anna's rage instantly. He took a long breath, and when he spoke, his English was halted, as if the words were stones he had to drag out of his chest. 10 winters ago," he said softly, "the soldiers came to my village. My father was away. I was young, not a warrior yet." He stared into the flames, seeing things Anna could not. "They burned the lodges. They killed the old ones. And they took the women." He looked at his hands, turning them over as if looking for blood. "My sister, her name was Nalin. She was bright, like the morning sun on the water. She laughed at everything." Anna felt her anger draining away, replaced by a cold ache in her chest. "The soldiers took her," Taza continued. "They tied her wrists. They put her on a horse. I ran after them. I ran until my lungs burned and my feet bled. But I was a boy. I had no gun. I had no horse." He looked up at Anna, and his eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "I never saw her again. We heard stories. She was sold, traded, used, died in a place far from the mountains." He gestured vaguely toward the dark desert. "When I saw you, behind the saloon, His voice cracked. He stopped, swallowed hard, and forced the control back into his tone. I saw the rope on your wrists. I saw the fear in your eyes, and for a moment, I did not see a white woman. I saw Nalan. He leaned forward, his intensity burning brighter than the fire. I could not save her. I was too small, too weak. I have carried that stone in my heart for 10 years. But that day, with you, I had gold. I had a gun. I was a man. He shook his head slowly. I did not buy you to own you. Anna, I bought you because I could not walk away and let it happen again. I could not let them take another sister. Silence stretched between them, heavy and profound. Anna stared at him, the monster she had feared. The savage the town had cursed was just a brother who missed his sister. The terrifying warrior was a boy who had run until his feet bled. The walls she had built against him, the walls of prejudice and fear, began to crack. She saw the scars on his soul, and they looked terrifyingly like her own. I did not know, she whispered. Taza picked up his rifle again, wiping the barrel with a cloth. We all carry ghosts, he said quietly. The desert is full of them. Anna wrapped her arms around her knees. She felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to reach out to him, to offer some comfort, but the distance between them still felt too great to cross. Instead, she sat in the silence, letting his story settle into her bones. They were two wreckage survivors, clinging to the same piece of driftwood. The next morning, the sky turned a sickly, bruised yellow. The wind died, leaving a heavy, suffocating stillness. Storm, Taza said, looking at the horizon. A big one. They barely had time to find shelter. Taza found a deep undercut in a sandstone cliff face, a shallow cave barely big enough for the two of them. He hobbled the horses and forced them to lie down in a nearby depression, covering their heads with blankets. Then the wall of dust hit. It was not like rain. It was a solid physical force. The world vanished in a screaming brown twilight. The sand blasted everything, finding every crack and seam. Get back! Taza shouted over the roar of the wind. He pushed Anna deep into the undercut, against the back wall of rock. The space was tiny. To fit, they had to be pressed together. Taza sat with his back to the wind, his body acting as a shield for hers. He pulled his heavy coat open and wrapped the edges around her, pulling her against his chest. Keep your head down. Cover your mouth. Anna buried her face in his shirt. The dust swirled around them, choking and thick. It was dark, hot, and terrifying. She could feel the grit in her teeth, in her eyes. She clung to him. It was instinct. He was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. She could feel the hard wall of his chest, the slow, powerful beat of his heart against her cheek. His arms were braced on either side of her, boxing her in, protecting her. The storm raged for hours. Time lost its meaning. There was only the wind, the dust, and the heat of his body. In the cramped darkness, the dynamic shifted. The fear of the storm began to recede, replaced by a sharp, electric awareness. She was pressed against the length of him. She could feel the muscles in his thighs, the rise and fall of his breath. She smelled the dust, but under it, she smelled him, sage, leather, and man. Taza shifted slightly to block a gust of sand, and his cheek brushed against her hair. He froze. Anna lifted her head slightly. Their faces were inches apart in the gloom. She could see the whites of his eyes, the dust coating his eyelashes. The air between them seemed to vibrate. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was raw, sudden, and terrifyingly intimate. The desire punched through her panic, shocking her. She wanted him to hold her tighter. She wanted to bridge the gap that remained. Taza looked at her. His gaze dropped to her lips, then snapped back up to her eyes. His breathing hitched, the rhythm breaking for the first time. He did not move away. He did not apologize. He held her gaze, and in that look, everything was stripped bare. No white, no Apache, just a man and a woman in the dark. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The tension was a pulled bowstring. If he leaned in, if she lifted her chin, but the weight of their worlds held them back. The memory of the auction. The memory of his sister. The memory of her husband. Taza swallowed hard and looked away, pressing his cheek against the rock wall. "Sleep," he rasped, his voice rougher than the sand. "The storm will pass." Anna lowered her head back to his chest, but she did not sleep. She listened to his heart beating, fast and hard, matching the rhythm of her own. When the wind finally died and the dust settled, the silence was deafening. They stepped apart awkwardly, brushing the sand from their clothes. Taza would not look at her. He busied himself with the horses, checking their eyes and nostrils. Anna stood by the cliff wall, wrapping her arms around herself. She felt cold, despite the heat. The storm had stripped away the polite fiction of their arrangement. They were no longer just traveling companions. They were two people who had been forged together in the heat of the dark. And now, in the light, they didn't know how to look at each other. "We ride," Taza said, swinging into his saddle. He did not offer his hand to help her up this time. He didn't need to, and perhaps he was afraid to touch her again. Anna mounted her horse, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs. She followed him out of the canyon, into a world that had been scoured clean. Everything looked different now. The land was sharper, the colors were brighter, and the back of the man riding in front of her seemed to draw her forward like a magnet. She was terrified of Dorsey. She was terrified of the Apaches. But mostly, as she watched Taza's silhouette against the clearing sky, she was terrified of the feeling waking up in her own heart. The climb into the Dragon Mountains was not a journey of miles, but of layers. They left the heat of the basin floor behind, trading the choking dust for air that grew thinner and sharper with every hour. The red rock cliffs rose around them like the walls of a fortress built by giants, vast slabs of sandstone stained with iron and time. The scrub pine twisted out of the rock face, gnarled and stubborn, their roots clutching at stone in a way that Anna felt in her own chest. She was tired. It was a bone-deep weariness that made her hands tremble on the reins. The men's clothing Taza had given her was durable, but it could not protect her from the bruising reality of days in the saddle. Yet, she did not complain. She watched the back of the man riding ahead of her. Taza sat his horse as if he were part of the animal's spine. He never slumped. He never seemed to tire. He was driving them toward a home she was terrified to see. Yet, the alternative, the open desert and the men hunting them, was worse. The trail narrowed, becoming a scratch of gravel along a precipice that dropped away into a blue haze of nothingness. A misstep here meant a fall that would leave no body to bury. Anna fixed her eyes on the hindquarters of Taza's horse, refusing to look down. They heard the scouts before they saw them. It was the call of a jay, sharp and scolding, repeated twice. Taza pulled his horse up instantly. He did not reach for his rifle. He simply sat, waiting. 3 men materialized from the brush and rock. They did not seem to ride out. They simply detached themselves from the landscape. They were Apache, dressed in buckskin and cloth, their faces painted with streaks of yellow and black. They were heavily armed, carrying carbines and knives, and their eyes were hard, suspicious slits under the brims of their hats. Taza spoke to them in their own tongue. His voice was low, rolling and guttural. Anna did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was the tone of a man stating his name and his business. The lead scout, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, looked at Taza, then shifted his gaze to Anna. The recognition in his eyes was instant, and it was followed immediately by hatred. He spat a sentence at Taza, the words sharp and biting. He gestured at Anna with the barrel of his rifle. Taza answered calmly, but his posture stiffened. The scout rode closer to Anna. He circled her horse, his pony stepping high and nervous. He looked her up and down, his lip curling. He said a word that sounded like wet clay hitting a wall. It was a curse. She knew it in her bones. He spat on the ground, the saliva landing inches from the toe of her boot. "White witch," the scout said in broken, heavy English. "Deathbringer." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands shook violently on the saddle horn. the leather slick with her sweat. She wanted to shrink, to hide inside the oversized canvas coat. But she remembered Taza's back. She remembered the firelight and the way he had looked at her during the storm. She lifted her chin. She looked the scout in the eye. She did not speak, but she did not look away. The scout scoffed. Turning his horse back to Taza, he waved them forward with a dismissive gesture, as if he were allowing a diseased dog to enter the camp only because the owner insisted. They rode on, the 3 scouts flanking them like jailers. The camp was hidden in a high bowl of the mountains, a place where water gathered in a deep, rock-lined pool, and the wind was blocked by the peaks. It was a temporary village, a collection of wickiups made of brush and hides that looked as if they could be dismantled in an hour. Smoke curled lazily from the cooking fires, smelling of juniper and roasting meat. As they rode in, the camp went silent. Dogs barked, lean and half-wild, but the people were quiet. Women stopped their work over hides, children froze in the middle of their games. Old men smoking pipes by the fires turned their heads slowly. They were all looking at her. Anna felt the weight of their gaze like a physical pressure. It was not the leering hunger of the men at the auction. It was colder. It was a judgment born of 100 years of war, broken treaties, and massacred villages. To them, she was not a woman. She was the enemy. She was the face of the people who were starving them. Taza dismounted near the center of the camp. He walked to Anna's horse and held the bridle. "Get down," he said softly. "Do not look at the ground." Anna swung her leg over and dropped to the earth. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself. She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. An older woman stepped forward from the largest wickiup. She was small, her skin a map of deep wrinkles, her hair streaked with gray and white. She wore a dress of heavy buckskin, beaded with intricate patterns. Her eyes were black obsidian, sharp and intelligent. This was Nalin, Taza's mother. Taza stepped forward and spoke to her. He gestured to Anna. The camp strained to listen. "I have returned," Taza said in English, perhaps so Anna would understand, or perhaps to make a point to the others who spoke the trade tongue. "And I have brought a wife." A ripple went through the crowd, a gasp, a murmur of disbelief. Nalin did not gasp. She looked at Taza, then she looked at Anna. She walked forward, her movement stiff with age but commanding respect. She stopped in front of Anna. She was a head shorter, but she seemed to tower over the white woman. Nalin reached out a hand, her fingers rough and calloused. She touched the fabric of Anna's coat, then the pale skin of her cheek. It was not a caress. It was an inspection. She was checking the teeth of a horse. "She is white," Nalin said. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "She is my wife," Taza repeated. "I bought her from the men who would have killed her. She is under my protection. She is of my fire now." Nalin's eyes narrowed. "She carries the smell of the settlements. She carries the bad luck of her people. Why did you bring this curse to us, my son?" "Because I chose to," Taza said. Nalin stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to Anna. "If she is of your fire, she works the fire," Nalin said. "We have no queens here. We have no guests who sit while others bleed." Nalin pointed to a flat stone mortar, a meditate, where a pile of dried corn kernels waited. "Grind," Nalin commanded. It was a test. Anna knew it. The whole camp knew it. They watched with folded arms and stony faces. Anna stepped forward. She had never ground corn on a stone. She had grown up in a house with a flour mill in the town nearby. She knelt in the dirt before the stone. She picked up the mano, the cylindrical grinding stone. It was heavy. She began to push the stone over the corn. The kernels were hard as rocks. They skittered away. She pushed harder. The stone slipped, scraping her knuckles against the rough volcanic rock of the metete. Skin tore. Blood welled up, bright and red against the dust. A child near the fire giggled. Anna bit her lip. She grabbed the stone again. She pushed. She ground. Her shoulders burned. The movement was awkward, inefficient. She was making a mess, turning the corn into coarse grit rather than flour. Nalin watched, her face impassive. Enough, Nayland said after a few minutes. You waste the corn. She gestured to a large woven jug. Sealed with pitch, water, the old woman ordered. The spring is up the trail. Fill it. Anna stood up, wiping her bloody hand on her trousers. She picked up the jug. It was heavy, even when empty. She walked toward the trail Nalin had indicated. The path to the spring was steep and slick with moss. Anna's legs were trembling from the ride. She reached the pool, her breath coming in short gasps. She knelt and submerged the jug. As it filled, it became immensely heavy. She hauled it out, water sloshing over the rim and soaking her boots. She lifted it to her shoulder, staggering under the weight. She made it halfway back to the camp. Her boot found a loose stone. Her ankle twisted. Anna fell hard, her knees slamming into the rock. The jug flew from her hands. It hit the ground and rolled, water gushing out into the thirsty dust. Silence. Then, laughter. It started with the children, high and cruel, but it spread to the women. They were laughing at the white woman's clumsiness. They were laughing at her weakness. Anna lay in the dirt, the pain in her knees blinding. She wanted to stay there. She wanted to dissolve into the earth and never rise again. She felt a hand on her arm. She looked up. Taza was there. He did not look happy, but he did not look ashamed. He looked angry, but not at her. Stand up, he said quietly. I spilled it, she whispered. I ruined it. It is just water, Taza said. The spring will give more. He helped her to her feet. He did not pick up the jug. He left it there for her to retrieve. He knew she had to finish the task. Anna limped to the jug. She picked it up. She walked back to the spring. She filled it again. She walked back to the camp. Every step a battle against gravity and shame. She set the full jug down at Nalin's feet. Nayland looked at the water, then at Anna's torn hands and dusty face. She is weak, a woman standing nearby muttered. She has hands like soft butter. She will die when the winter comes. Taza turned on the woman. His voice was not a shout, but it cut through the camp like a whip crack. She rode the desert for 3 days. Taza said, she has bruises from the white men that you have not seen. She bleeds, but she stands. That is more than you did when you first came to this band from the southern clans. The woman flushed and looked away. Taza looked around the circle. She learns, he said, give her the grace of time, or answer to me. He took Anna's arm and led her away from the fire, toward a small shelter set apart from the others on the edge of the clearing. It was a wickiup, a dome of bent willow branches covered in hides and canvas. Inside, it was dark and smelled of sage and earth. There was a bed of furs on one side, bear and deer skins piled thick against the cold. This is our place, Taza said. Anna stood in the center of the small space. The intimacy of it was suffocating. It was a marital home, a bedroom. She wrapped her arms around herself. This was the moment she had feared since the auction, the payment, the night. Taza closed the flap of the wickiup, shutting out the wind in the eyes of the camp. The only light came from the coals of a small fire pit in the center. He began to unbuckle his gun belt. Anna flinched. She backed up until her shoulders hit the rough frame of the wall. Taza paused. He looked at her, seeing the terror in her eyes. He saw the way she braced herself, as if preparing for a blow. He hung the belt on a branch. He took off his heavy coat. Sleep, he said. He pointed to the furs. Anna stared at him. Where will you sleep? Taza took a blanket from a pile and laid it on the ground on the opposite side of the fire pit. Near the door. Here, he said, but, Anna stammered. I am your wife. You paid for me. Taza sat down and began to pull off his moccasins. He did not look at her. You are my wife, he said, but you are not a thing. I do not take what is not given. He lay down and turned his back to her. Anna stood there for a long time, her heart pounding. She looked at the furs. They looked soft, warm. She looked at Taza's back. Slowly, carefully, she sat down on the furs. She did not take off her boots or her coat. She curled into a ball, watching him. He did not move. He did not speak. The wind moaned outside, tearing at the hides, but inside, there was only the sound of the fire popping. Anna slept, but it was a light, fragile sleep. Days turned into a week. The camp remained a hostile place, a circle of cold shoulders and whispered insults. Anna worked until her body ached. She hauled water until her shoulders calloused. She scraped hides until her fingers were raw. She ignored the snickers. She ignored the spit. Taza was often gone during the day, hunting or scouting with the men, but at night, he returned to the wickiup. He brought her the best cuts of the meat. He fixed her boots when the soles began to separate. But he did not touch her. He kept to his side of the fire, a silent guardian. One evening, the air was particularly cold. Taza had brought in a new buffalo robe, heavy and thick. "Put this on the bed," he said. "The frost will be hard tonight." Anna nodded. She turned away from him to change out of her work shirt, which was stiff with sweat and grime. She thought he was looking at the fire. She unbuttoned the shirt and let it slide off her shoulders. She wore a thin camisole underneath, the fabric threadbare. Taza made a sound. It was a sharp intake of breath, like a man who has been punched. Anna froze. She pulled the shirt back up quickly, clutching it to her chest. She turned around. Taza was staring at her. He was staring at her back. He stood up. He crossed the small space in 2 strides. Anna shrank back, terrified by the look on his face. His eyes were burning with a dark, terrible fire. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. "Turn around," he said. His voice was a growl. "No," Anna whispered. "Please, turn around," he repeated. He reached out and took her shoulder. He turned her. He pulled the shirt down from her shoulders again. The air hit her skin. She shivered. Taza stared at the scars. They were old, but they were ugly. Thick, raised welts crisscrossed her back. Marks of a belt, marks of a whip. The legacy of a stepfather who believed that sin could be beaten out of a child, and later, of a husband who believed a wife was a possession to be disciplined. Taza reached out. His hand hovered over the skin, trembling slightly. "Who?" he asked. The word was a knife. "Men," Anna whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "White men, good men, Christian men." Taza let out a breath that was half sigh, half snarl. He stepped back. He looked at the roof of the wickiup, his hands opening and closing into fists. "They call us savages," he said to the darkness. "They call us animals because we kill to survive. But we do not do. This, we do not beat our women. We do not carve our hate into the skin of those we claim to love." He looked back at her. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a sorrow so profound it broke Anna's heart. "Sit," he said. He went to his saddlebags. He took out a small clay pot. He removed the lid, and the smell of pungent herbs and bear grease filled the small space. Anna stood clutching her shirt. What are you doing?" "It is salve," Taza said, "made from the fat of the bear and the roots of the healing plant. It takes the tightness from the old scars. It helps the skin remember how to be soft." He knelt by the bed of furs. He looked up at her. "Come, lie face down." His voice was low, unsteady. It was not a command. It was a plea. Anna hesitated. Every instinct she had screamed at her to run, to never let a man touch her there, to never be vulnerable. But she looked at his hands. They were large, capable of violence, but they held the clay pot with a reverence she had never seen. She dropped the shirt. She lay down on the furs, burying her face in the soft hair of the buffalo robe. She squeezed her eyes shut. She waited for the pain. She felt his weight settle on the edge of the bed. Then, his fingers. He dipped his fingers in the salve. He touched the worst scar, a jagged line that ran from her shoulder blade to her spine. She flinched. "Easy," Taza whispered. "Easy." He began to rub the salve into the scar tissue. His touch was firm but agonizingly gentle. He traced the lines of her pain. He massaged the knots in her muscles. It did not hurt. It felt warm. Taza worked in silence. He mapped the history of her suffering with his hands. He touched every welt, every bruise, every memory of violence. And with every touch, He seemed to be trying to erase it. He seemed to be trying to pull the poison out of her skin. Anna's breathing hitched. A sob caught in her throat. It was too much. The kindness was too much. She could have withstood a beating. She knew how to survive pain. She did not know how to survive tenderness. Tears leaked from her eyes, soaking into the fur beneath her cheek. "Why?" she choked out. "Why are you doing this?" "Because they are not yours to keep," Taza murmured. "These marks, they belong to the men who made them. I am washing them away." His hand moved to the small of her back. The heat of his palm seeped into her spine. Anna felt a strange sensation unfurling in her belly. It was not fear. It was a heavy, languid heat. It was safety. And wrapped inside the safety was something sharp and bright. Desire. She wanted him to keep touching her. She wanted him to never stop. She turned her head slightly, looking at him through her tears. His face was a mask of concentration. He was sweating. This was hard for him too, to touch her and not take her, to heal her when he surely wanted her. "Taza," she whispered. He stopped. His hand rested on her shoulder. "Sleep now," he said. "The medicine needs time." He pulled the blanket up over her bare shoulders, tucking it in around her neck. He stayed there for a moment, his hand resting on the blanket over her heart. Then he moved back to his side of the fire. Anna lay in the dark, her back tingling, her heart full to bursting. She realized then that she was no longer a prisoner. She was something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. The weeks turned into a month. The salve became a ritual, and with the healing of her skin came a healing of her spirit. Anna stopped walking with her head down. She began to watch the women. She mimicked their movements. She learned to carry the water jug on her head, balancing the weight so it did not strain her back. She learned to scrape the hides with the grain, not against it. One afternoon, she walked to the corral where the horses were kept. A roan mare had broken her tether and was pacing nervously. The Apache men were busy elsewhere. Anna climbed the fence. She approached the mare. She spoke to it in low, soothing tones, the way her father had taught her before the world ended. "Easy, girl, easy." She reached out and caught the halter. She swung herself up onto the mare's bare back, gripping the mane. She rode the horse back to the line, her body moving fluidly with the animal. When she slid down, she turned to find Nayland watching her. The old woman did not smile, but she nodded. Once, that night, at the fire, Nayland pushed a bowl of stew toward Anna. It had extra meat in it. The camp began to shift. The insults stopped. The children began to follow Anna around, asking her the English names for things. Stone, sky, horse, Anna taught them, and in return, she learned. Tsa, ya, li. She was becoming part of the rhythm of the high country, but the world below had not forgotten them. It was late afternoon when a runner arrived. He was a young boy, his chest heaving, his pony lathered with foam. He ran straight to the council fire. Taza was there, sharpening his knife. He stood up as the boy spoke. Anna was scraping a hide nearby. She saw Taza's face go still. She saw the elders exchange dark looks. She moved closer, pretending to sharpen her scraper. The boy spoke in Apache, but Anna caught the words she had learned to fear. Indea, white men, soldiers, and a name, Dorsey. Later, inside the wiki up. Taza was silent. He packed his pipe but did not light it. "What is it?" Anna asked. Taza looked at her. "The white talker, the agent, and Dorsey, they are spreading lies." "What lies?" "They say I stole you. They say we are torturing you, cutting you. They say they must rescue you to save your soul." Anna gasped. "But that is not true. I can tell them." Taza shook his head. "They do not care about the truth. They care about the excuse. They use your name to bring the soldiers. They use you to get the army to clear these mountains so Dorsey can graze his cattle." He looked at her, and his eyes were full of anguish. "The elders are afraid. They say you are the lightning rod. If you are here, the lightning will strike us all." "What?" "What are they saying we should do? Some say we must go deeper, into the high peaks where the snow never melts. where the children will freeze and the old ones will die. And the others? Anna asked, though she already knew. Taza looked at his hands. Others say I must send you back, leave you on the trail for the soldiers to find. If they have you, they might turn back. Anna felt the ground drop away beneath her. Send me back? To Dorsey? Taza stood up. He paced the small wickiup. A caged tiger. I told them no, he said fiercely. I told them I would kill the man who tries to take you, but Anna saw the fear in him. Not fear for himself, but for his people, for Nalin, for the children she had taught to say Sky. If I stay, they die, Anna whispered. Taza grabbed her shoulders. If you go, you die. Dorsey will not forgive you for running. He will make you wish you had died in the wagon train. I don't care about me, Anna cried. I care about you. I care about your family. Taza pulled her close. He buried his face in her hair. You are my family, he said roughly. You are my heart. I will not trade my heart to buy a few days of peace. He held her tight, his grip desperate. We will find a way. He promised. We will fight. Anna clung to him, listening to the wind howling outside. It sounded like a warning. It sounded like the future coming to crush them. She knew then that he would burn the world down to keep her, and she knew that she would let him. But the guilt was a cold stone in her stomach. She was the reason the wolves were circling, and she did not know if love, no matter how fierce, was enough to stop them. Winter arrived in the Dragon Mountains not as a guest, but as a besieging army. It began with the frost, a glittering, treacherous lace that coated the yellow grass at dawn, crunching loudly under the hooves of the ponies. Then came the wind, stripping the warmth from the air until every breath was a puff of white smoke, a ghost escaping the lungs. The game moved lower, down into the valleys where the snow did not drift as deep, and the hunters of the band had to ride further and return with less. Hunger was a quiet presence in the camp, sitting by the fires and sleeping in the bellies of the children. It sharpened the faces of the elders and shortened the tempers of the men, and as the snow began to dust the high peaks, painting them in stark, unforgiving white, the eyes that watched Anna grew colder. Far below, in the warmer comforts of the military outpost at Fort Stanton, the machinery of her destruction was being oiled. Agent Silas Meeks sat behind a heavy oak desk, the heat of a cast-iron stove doing little to thaw the ambition in his heart. Meeks was a man of soft hands and hard ambitions, eager for a promotion to Washington. He saw the situation not as a tragedy, but as a headline. I tell you, Colonel, Meeks said, leaning forward, the Apache have stolen a white woman of breeding and virtue. They are likely torturing her as we speak. If we bring her home, it is a triumph for civilization. If we punish the band that took her, it is a lesson for the territory. The colonel, a weary veteran of too many border skirmishes, nodded slowly. He looked to the scout standing by the window. The scout was a man named Elias Cobb, a former associate of Caleb Dorsey. Cobb had a face like a dried apple and eyes that burned with a perpetual, low-grade fever. He had lost a brother to an Apache raid 3 years prior, and he had never stopped looking for a reason to kill. They are up in the Dragons, Cobb said, his voice a rasp. I found sign near the basin. A mule lost a shoe. They are hurting for food. If we push now, before the deep snows block the passes, we can trap them in the box canyon. Meeks smiled, a thin stretching of lips. Then we ride, Meeks declared. We will bring the girl home, and we will wipe out the nest, high in the stronghold. Anna felt the tightening of the noose, though she could not see the rope. The hostility in the camp, which had abated slightly during the autumn, returned with the cold. The people were hungry, and fear made them look for a scapegoat. She was scraping a deer hide near the edge of the camp, her fingers numb despite the fire Taza had built for her, when a shadow fell across her work. She looked up to find Kaya standing over her. He was young, perhaps 20 winters, with a face that should have been handsome but was twisted by a grief that had never healed. He held a carbine in his hand, though he did not point it at her. You eat the meat our hunters bleed for, Kaya said. His English was better than most, Learned from trading posts before the wars grew hot. I work for my share. Kaya, Anna said, keeping her voice steady. I scraped this hide. I gathered the wood. Kaya kicked the pile of firewood she had collected, scattering it into the snow. Wood does not bring back the dead. He spat. He stepped closer, looming over her. Anna scrambled to her feet, clutching the scraping tool, a piece of sharpened bone. My fiancée was named Esha, Kaya said, his voice trembling with rage. She was beautiful. She laughed like the water. The soldiers came because they said we stole cattle. They shot her while she was running to the rocks. I am sorry, Anna whispered. No, you are not sorry, Kaya shouted. You are the same as the cattle. You are the excuse. The white men down there, they tell stories about you. They say we hurt you. So they come with the cannons. He pointed a shaking finger at her face. You are death, white woman. As long as you are here, the crosshairs are on our chests. If you cared for Taza, if you cared for this people, you would leave. You would walk off the cliff and save us the trouble. Anna backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to argue, but the terrible truth of his words silenced her. He was right. She was the magnet drawing the iron. Leave her be, Kaya. The voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of stone. Taza emerged from the trees, a brace of rabbits hanging from his belt. He did not shout. He did not draw his weapon. He simply walked between Kaya and Anna, placing his body in the line of fire. She is my wife, Taza said. She is a curse, Kaya yelled, tears springing to his eyes. Do you not see it? Taza, the agent is coming. Dorsey is coming. They will kill us all to get her back. Why do you choose her over your own blood? I choose her because she is my blood now, Taza said, and I do not let fear decide who I love. Kaya stared at him, his chest heaving. Then he looked at Anna with a hatred so pure it burned. Then you will die with her, Kaya whispered, and Esha will weep for you in the spirit land. He turned and stormed away, vanishing into the gray light of the afternoon. Taza watched him go, his shoulders slumping. He looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes had deepened in the last few weeks. He was a man holding up the sky, and his arms were trembling. He turned to Anna. He did not smile. He reached out and touched her cheek with a cold hand. Are you hurt? He asked. No, Anna said. But he is right. Taza. Taza shook his head violently. He speaks from pain. Pain is a liar. Is it? Anna asked. If I were not here, would the agent come? Would Dorsey care about a small band in the mountains? Taza did not answer immediately. He looked at the snow-covered peaks. They always come. Anna, if not for you, then for the land. If not for the land, then for the water. You are not the cause. You are just the story they tell to make themselves feel righteous. He picked up the scattered wood, stacking it back into a neat pile. Do not listen to the ghosts, he said. We will survive this winter, but that night. Anna lay awake while Taza slept the sleep of the dead beside her. She listened to the wind howling outside the wickiup. She thought of Kaya's dead fiancé. She thought of Nalan, who had grown thinner. She thought of Taza, who would stand in front of a cannon to protect her. She loved him. The realization was a sharp pain in her chest. She loved him enough to die for him. But more importantly, she loved him enough to leave him. She waited until his breathing was deep and rhythmic, slowly, with agonizing care. She threw off the buffalo robe. The cold air hit her like a slap. She pulled on her boots, her hands shaking so hard she could barely lace them. She put on the heavy canvas coat and the hat he had given her. She found a scrap of tanned leather and a piece of charcoal from the fire pit. She did not know how to write in Apache, and he could not read English, so she drew a picture. A stick figure of a woman walking away, a stick figure of a man staying by a fire, and a heart broken in two. She placed the leather on his chest, light as a feather. She looked at his face one last time in the dying embers of the fire, the strong nose, the mouth that had softened only for her. She wanted to kiss him, but she knew if she touched him, she would not have the strength to go, live. She whispered into the silence. She slipped out of the wickiup and into the freezing dark. The camp was silent, save for the snapping of a flag on a pole and the restless shifting of the horses. Anna did not take a horse. That would be theft. She walked past the sentries, using the shadows Taza had taught her to navigate. She slipped out of the bowl of the mountains and onto the treacherous, icy trail leading down. The emptiness outside the camp was terrifying. The mountains were vast, indifferent monsters of rock and ice. The wind tore at her coat, trying to push her off the ledge. But she walked on, driven by a grim, suicidal determination. She would walk until she found the white settlements, or until the cold took her. Either way, Taza would be safe. She walked for hours. Her feet went numb. Her face felt like a mask of ice. The dawn broke gray and sickly, revealing a landscape of stark, brutal beauty. She was miles from the camp now, down in the foothills where the snow was slush and mud. Taza woke with the sun. His hand reached out instinctively for the warmth beside him, and found only cold fur. He sat up, blinking. The wickiup was empty. "Anna?" he said, his voice raspy with sleep. He saw the flap of the door moving slightly in the wind. Then he looked down. The scrap of leather lay on his chest. He picked it up. He looked at the charcoal drawing. The woman leaving, the man staying. Panic, cold and sharp as a knife, slammed into his gut. It was a physical blow. He scrambled to his feet, crashing out of the wickiup. He ran to the edge of the camp, scanning the trail. He saw the faint, partially filled footprints in the snow. Small boots. Heading down, Taza, it was Nalin. She stood by the fire, wrapped in a blanket. She saw the look on his face, the wild, terrified look of a man who has lost his soul. "She is gone." Taza choked out. "She left to save us. Let her go." "My son," Nalin said, her voice sad but firm. "It is the only way. The spirits have guided her." "No!" Taza roared. The sound echoed off the cliffs, startling the horses. "She is my life. Do you understand? If she dies in the snow, I die with her." He did not wait for permission. He did not call a council. He ran to the corral, grabbing his horse's mane and swinging up bareback, not even taking the time to saddle. He kicked the horse into a gallop, thundering out of the camp and down the narrow trail, heedless of the ice, heedless of the danger. He rode like a demon. He tracked her not with his eyes, but with his heart. "Please," he prayed to the wind. "Please let her be safe. Do not take this one thing from me." Anna was not safe. She had reached the floor of a narrow canyon, a place of shadows and tumbled boulders. She was exhausted, stumbling with every step. Her vision was blurring. She heard the horses behind her and turned, her heart leaping with a foolish hope that it was Taza. It was not Taza. 3 riders emerged from the brush. They were hard men, bearded and dirty, wearing mismatched clothes that marked them as drifters, bandits, desperados who preyed on the weak along the border trails. "Well now," the lead rider said, pulling up his horse. He had a wandering eye and teeth filed to points. "Look what the snow blew in." Anna backed up until her back hit a rock wall. She fumbled for the knife Taza had given her, her frozen fingers clumsy. "Stay back," she warned, her voice cracking. The men laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "A white girl, out here alone?" the second man said, swinging down from his saddle. "Dressed like a buck, but pretty underneath. I bet they moved in on her." They did not fear her knife. They were wolves circling a lamb. Anna slashed at the first man. The blade caught his sleeve, tearing the fabric. "You little bitch," he snarled. He lunged. Anna fought. She bit his hand. She kicked his shin. She clawed at his face. She fought with the ferocity of the wild things she had lived among. But they were 3, and they were strong. They grabbed her arms. They twisted the knife from her grip. They slammed her against the rock, pinning her there. The leader grabbed her face, squeezing her jaw. "Dorsey has a price on a girl like you." He grinned. "Or maybe we just keep you for ourselves for a while. It gets lonely in the winter." Anna squeezed her eyes shut, screaming a silent scream inside her head. "Taza, I am sorry. The gunshot was deafening in the narrow canyon. The leader's head snapped back. He crumpled to the ground, a hole in his forehead. The other two men spun around, reaching for their guns. Taza was there. He had not fired from a distance. He had ridden his horse straight down the scree slope, a landslide of vengeance. He leaped from the horse's back, landing on the second bandit. The momentum carried them both to the ground. Taza did not use a gun now. He used his knife. His arm rose and fell in a blur of motion. The bandit screamed once, then gurgled into silence. The third man, the one holding Anna, let her go and scrambled for his pistol. Taza rose from the dead man, his chest heaving, his face smeared with blood that was not his own. He looked like the nightmare the settlers told their children about. He was pure fury. He was death incarnate. The bandit fired. The bullet struck the rock near Taza's head, sending stone chips flying. Taza threw his knife. It turned end over end, a silver wheel in the air. It struck the bandit in the chest, burying itself to the hilt. The man fell backward, looking surprised. Silence rushed back into the canyon, heavy and ringing. Taza stood amidst the bodies, breathing hard. His hands were fists at his sides. He turned slowly to look at Anna. She was pressed against the rock, sliding down until she hit the dirt. She looked at him, and she saw the violence in him. She saw the killer, but she did not see a monster. She saw a man who had ridden through hell to find her. She saw a man who had stained his soul to keep hers clean. "Taza," she sobbed. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He fell to his knees in the mud, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was bruising, desperate. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her frantically. "Did they touch you?" "No," she wept. "No, you came. You came." He pulled her into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, and she felt him shaking. The great warrior, the stone-faced Apache, was trembling like a leaf in the wind. "You left me," he whispered, his voice broken. "You left me. I wanted to save you," Anna cried, clinging to his bloody coat. "I wanted you to live. If you leave, I do not live," Taza shouted, pulling back to look at her. His eyes were wild, tears cutting tracks through the dust and blood on his face. "You take my heart with you. Anna, do you not see? You are not a burden. You are the only thing that makes this world bearable." He gripped her hands. Her knuckles were bruised, her fingers bloody from where she had fought the men. He kissed her hands, smearing his own blood onto hers, mixing it together. "We go back," he said fiercely. "We go back and we fight. But we do it together. Never alone. Promise me. I promise," she whispered. The wind began to pick up, bringing with it the scent of snow. Taza helped her stand. He retrieved his knife and caught the horses. He found a small cave further up the canyon, a shelter from the biting wind. Inside, out of the wind, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving them both shivering and raw. Taza built a fire with shaking hands. Anna sat watching him, the image of his violence warring with the tenderness of his hands as he fed the kindling. He turned to her. He stripped off his bloody coat and used snow to wash his face and hands. Then he came to sit beside her. He did not touch her yet. He looked at her as if trying to memorize her face, to make sure she was real. "Why?" he asked again, softly this time. "Why did you think you had to go?" Anna looked into the fire. "Because I am broken. Taza, I have been broken since I was a child." She began to speak. The words spilled out, a flood she could no longer hold back. She told him about her stepfather's belt. She told him about the husband who had bought her from her father for 3 cows, a man who saw a wife as a servant who could be used in the dark. She told him about the terror of the auction block, the feeling of being an object, a thing with no voice. "I ran because I am afraid," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I am afraid that if I stay, I will destroy you, and I am afraid. I am afraid that if I let myself love you, truly love you, and then lose you, I will shatter into dust." Taza listened, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he reached out and took her hand. "I'm afraid too," he admitted. His voice was low, vibrating in the small cave. I wake up every morning terrified that the world will take you back. I have lost everything. Anna, my land, my sister, my freedom. I have nothing left to give the spirits. He squeezed her hand. But fear is not a reason to run. Fear is the fire that tests the metal. He moved closer. The space between them vanished. The air in the cave grew heavy, charged with the electricity of their near-death escape and the raw honesty of their words. Anna looked at him. She saw the blood on his shirt. She saw the scar on his cheek. She saw the man who had killed for her, who had defied his own mother for her, who had treated her scarred back like holy ground. She realized then that she was done running. She was done being a victim. Taza, she whispered. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. "Kiss me," she said. His eyes snapped open. He looked at her, searching for doubt. He found none. He leaned in. His lips brushed hers, tentative, careful. He was giving her the chance to pull away. She did not pull away. She pressed forward, deepening the kiss. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of salt and grief and fierce, burning need. It was a claiming. Taza groaned, a low sound in his throat. His arms went around her, pulling her against his chest. They fell back onto the blankets, tangling together. Anna felt a flicker of the old panic, the weight of a man, the feeling of being trapped. She stiffened. Taza stopped instantly. He froze, hovering over her, his weight on his elbows. "Anna?" he breathed. She looked up at him. He was waiting. He would stop if she said the word. He would walk away and sleep in the snow if she asked him to. That knowledge, that absolute power of choice, shattered the fear. "I am here," she whispered. "I am yours, not because you bought me, but because I choose you." She pulled him down. The night became a blur of sensation. It was clumsy at first, filled with nervous laughter and whispered reassurances. Hands fumbled with buttons. Skin met skin, hot and shivering in the cold air. But as the fire burned low, the awkwardness melted into a rhythm as old as the mountains. Taza paused, looking down at her in the dim light. His eyes were dark pools of adoration. "Come," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Lie face down." Anna's breath hitched. She remembered the last time he had said those words. The salve, the healing. Now, the words meant something else. They were an invitation to trust him completely, to give him her back, her most vulnerable place, and know that he would worship it, not wound it. She rolled onto her stomach. She felt his hands on her skin, sliding down her spine. He kissed the old scars, one by one. He reclaimed the map of her pain, turning it into a map of pleasure. She gasped, arching into his touch. Then she turned back to him, pulling him close, wrapping her legs around him. There were tears. There were gasps that sounded like sobs. It was not the clean, pretty romance of storybooks. It was the desperate, messy, holy union of two people who had found life in the middle of a graveyard. When it was over, they lay tangled together under the buffalo robe, their breathing slowing in the quiet dark. Taza held her as if she were made of glass. Anna rested her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. She was no longer Anna the captive. She was not Anna the victim. She was Anna, wife of Taza, and for the first time in her life, she was free. The high country of the Dragon Mountains did not welcome intruders, and that winter, it seemed determined to freeze the blood of even those who called it home. The snow fell not in soft flakes but in hard, driving pellets that hissed against the skin like sand. It piled deep in the passes, turning the world into a blinding expanse of white that erased trails and muffled sound. Taza led his band higher, past the timberline where the pines were twisted into agonizing shapes by the wind, up into the jagged basalt peaks where the air was so thin it made the lungs ache. He remembered these paths from his childhood, secret ways that the antelope knew, narrow ledges where a horse had to place its hooves with the precision of a dancer or fall 1,000 feet into the blue shadows below. Food became a ghost they chased but rarely caught. The deer had moved down to the valleys to escape the deep drifts. and the band could not follow them without exposing themselves to the soldiers. They ate a thin gruel made from stored corn and mesquite beans, supplemented by the occasional rabbit or wood rat. Hunger was a constant companion, sharpening the cheekbones of the children and putting a hollow, haunted look in the eyes of the elders. Yet, in this crucible of ice and stone, Anna found a strength she had not known she possessed. She no longer shivered uselessly by the fire while others worked. Her hands, once soft and prone to blistering, had grown hard and calloused. She learned to scrape the ice from the water holes without complaining. She learned to chew the inner bark of the pine to stave off the gnawing pains in her stomach. Her place in the band shifted. She was no longer the outsider, the white burden. She became a thread woven into the fabric of their survival. One evening, as the wind howled like a wounded animal outside the wickiups, Anna sat with a group of women and children huddled around a smoky fire. A baby was crying, a thin wailing sound of hunger and cold. The mother, a young woman named Sani, looked exhausted, her eyes heavy with despair. Anna reached out. "Let me hold him," she said softly. "Rest your arms." Sani hesitated, then passed the bundle of furs. Anna rocked the child, tucking the blanket closer to share her own body heat. She began to hum. It was a tune from her own childhood, a song her mother had sung on the porch of a house that was now just ash in her memory. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry." The words were English, foreign and strange in the smoke-filled shelter, but the melody was universal. It was the sound of comfort. Slowly, the other women joined in, adding a low, rhythmic chant in their own tongue. The two songs, born of different worlds, blended together in the dark. The English lullaby and the Apache song of the mountain spirits twisted around each other, rising with the smoke. Nalin, sitting on the other side of the fire repairing a moccasin, paused. She looked at Anna, her black eyes unreadable in the gloom. She did not smile, but she nodded slowly. It was a small gesture, but in the hierarchy of the camp, it was a shield. It meant she belongs. But not everyone was swayed by a song. Kaya watched Anna with eyes that burned cold. He sat apart from the others, sharpening his knife until the blade was a silver sliver. He saw the way Taza looked at her, with a softness that a war chief could not afford. He saw the way the elders were beginning to trust her. And he saw it as a weakness, a rot that would bring the roof down on their heads. His anger was not without cause. Below the snow line, the world was moving against them. Agent Silas Meeks rode at the head of a column of blue-coated cavalry, his heavy coat buttoned to his chin. Beside him rode Caleb Dorsey, wrapped in buffalo furs, his face a mask of grim determination. Behind them came the scouts, men who read the ground like a newspaper. They found the signs they were looking for, or rather, they found signs and twisted them to fit the story they needed to tell. They came upon the ruins of an old army supply depot, burned out years ago in a raid by a different band entirely. The charred timbers stuck out of the snow like black ribs. "Look at this," Meeks shouted to the shivering soldiers, gesturing grandly. "Savage work. They destroy government property. They bite the hand that tries to feed them." Dorsey rode past the ruins, his eyes scanning the ridgeline. He did not care about government property. He cared about the insult. He cared about the woman who had been bought out from under his nose by a man he considered an animal. Further up the trail, they found a cow that had strayed from a herd miles away and died of exposure. The coyotes had been at it, tearing the carcass apart. Meeks pointed at the mangled remains. "Tortured," he declared, shaking his head with faux sorrow. "Just like they are doing to the girl. They cut the cattle to make them suffer, just for sport." The soldiers, young men from Ohio and Pennsylvania who had never seen an Apache, gripped their carbines tighter. They believed him. The lie took root in their hearts, turning their fear into righteous anger. They were not chasing refugees. They were hunting monsters. The collision happened 3 days later. Taza had led a small party down to a frozen creek bed in a lower valley, hoping to find deer in the willow thickets. Anna rode with them, her rifle scabbard empty but her eyes sharp. She was helping to spot game. Taza's cousin, a bright-eyed boy of 16 named Little Hawk, rode point. The morning was crisp and still. the air so clear it seemed to magnify the world. The silence was absolute. Then, a crack. It sounded like a branch snapping under a heavy boot, but louder. A puff of blue smoke blossomed from a cluster of boulders on the ridge above them. Little Hawk jerked in his saddle. A red bloom appeared on his chest, bright against his buckskin shirt. He looked down at it, surprised, before sliding slowly from his horse. "Ambush!" Taza roared. The valley erupted. Gunfire hammered the air, echoing off the canyon walls until it sounded like a thunderstorm. Bullets slapped into the frozen mud and whined off the rocks. "Cover! Get to cover!" Taza screamed, wheeling his horse. He fired his lever-action Winchester from the hip, sending a spray of lead toward the ridge to keep the attackers' heads down. Anna threw herself from her saddle as the horses screamed and scattered. She hit the hard ground, rolling behind a fallen log. The air was filled with the angry buzz of hornets, bullets cutting through the brush. She looked up and saw Little Hawk lying in the open, writhing in the snow. He was trying to crawl, leaving a smear of red behind him. The soldiers on the ridge were adjusting their aim. Anna did not think. She did not calculate the odds. She scrambled out from behind the log. "Anna, no!" Taza shouted. Seeing her move, she ran low, skidding on the ice, until she reached the boy. He was heavy, his eyes wide with shock. "Help me!" he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "Grab my belt!" Anna yelled over the roar of the guns. She grabbed the collar of his coat. She dug her heels into the frozen earth. She pulled. She was not a large woman, but adrenaline gave her the strength of 10. She dragged him foot by agonizing foot, the bullets kicking up snow around her boots. She hauled him behind the log just as a slug slammed into the wood where his head had been a second before. She pressed her hands to his wound, trying to staunch the flow. Her hands were slick and shaking. The blood was hot, steaming in the cold air. Little Hawk looked at her. He tried to speak, but his eyes rolled back. His breath rattled once, and then he was gone. He died there, in the arms of the white woman his people had called a curse. On the ridge, the firing slowed. "Hold fire!" a voice bellowed. Anna looked up, peering over the log. A man stood on the rock outcropping, silhouetted against the gray sky. He wore a long duster and a hat with a silver band. Caleb Dorsey. He had a pair of field glasses pressed to his eyes. He lowered them, and even from this distance, Anna could feel his gaze. "Anna!" Dorsey shouted. Dorsey. His voice carried across the valley, raw and commanding. "Anna, get away from them! Run to me!" Anna froze. She looked at the dead boy in her arms. She looked at Taza, who was crouched behind a boulder 20 yards away, reloading his rifle with grim efficiency. "You are safe now," Dorsey yelled. "We are here to save you. Run!" The soldiers held their fire, waiting for the captive to make her break. They expected her to leap up, weeping with gratitude, and run toward their lines. Anna slowly laid Little Hawk's head down in the snow. She wiped her bloody hands on her trousers. She stood up. She did not run toward the ridge. She turned and ran toward Taza. She threw herself into the shelter of his boulder, colliding with him. She grabbed his arm, burying her face in his shoulder. "She is mine!" Dorsey screamed from the ridge. The sound was not a rescue cry anymore. It was the howl of a man whose property had rebelled. "Look at her!" Dorsey shouted to the soldiers and the agent. "She is brainwashed. The savages have turned her mind. Kill them! Kill them all!" The gunfire resumed, ferocious and hateful. But Taza and the others had used the pause to find their exit. "To the horses!" Taza ordered. "Up the draw!" They retreated under a hail of lead, slipping away into the labyrinth of the upper canyons where the cavalry horses could not follow. They left Little Hawk's body in the snow, a debt that would have to be paid later. The mood in the high valley that night was darker than the storm clouds gathering on the peaks. They had lost a son. They had been found. The noose was not just tightening. It was chafing the skin. The council was held in a cave to hide the firelight. The elders sat in a circle, their faces grim masks in the flickering orange glow. Naylin sat with her head bowed, mourning her nephew. "We cannot stay here," an elder named Cochise Not the great chief, but a man of the same name, said heavily, "They have the scent. They will bring big guns next time. They will hunt us until we are all dead," Kaya said from the shadows. His voice was flat, devoid of the fire he usually carried. It was the voice of defeat. And it is because of her. He pointed at Anna, who sat by Taza's side. Dorsey saw her. Kaya continued. He saw her choose Taza. He will not stop now. His pride is worth more to him than gold. As long as she is here, he will burn these mountains to ash. A murmur of agreement went around the circle. Even those who had come to accept Anna looked at her with pity and fear. They were tired. They were hungry. They just wanted the hunting to stop. "Give her back," a woman whispered. "Send her down with a white flag. Maybe then they will go away." Taza went rigid. He started to rise, but Anna placed a hand on his knee, stopping him. She looked at the faces around the fire. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the fear. She looked at Nalin, who was weeping silently. She stood up. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was clear. "He is right," Anna said. The circle went quiet. Taza looked up at her, his eyes widening. "I am the reason they are here," Anna said. "Dorsey wants me. The agent wants a victory." She took a deep breath. "I will go down. I will walk to their camp tomorrow." "No," Taza snarled, but she ignored him. "I will tell them. I will tell them I was captive," she said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "I will tell them I was too afraid to run until now. I will tell them you treated me badly. They will believe it because it is what they want to hear, and maybe they will stop hunting you." She looked down at Taza. "It is the only way to save your family." The silence that followed was heavy. The elders looked at each other. It was a good offer, a pragmatic offer. It was a way out. Taza stood up slowly. He seemed to grow in the firelight, his shadow stretching long and distorted against the cave wall. He looked at Anna with a mixture of love and fury that made her knees weak. Then he looked at the council. "You hear her?" Taza asked, his voice low and dangerous. "She offers to sacrifice herself. She offers to lie. She offers to go back to a man who will treat her worse than a dog, just to buy you a few days of quiet." He walked around the circle, looking each elder in the eye. "And if we let her? What then?" He stopped before Kaya. "If we give her back, we tell them that they are right. We tell them that she is property. We tell them that an Apache cannot love a white woman, only steal her. We tell them that we are the savages they say we are." He turned back to Anna, grabbing her hand and pulling her to his side. His grip was iron. "I did not buy a cow," he said fiercely. "I bought a life. I chose a wife. If I give her back now, I am not a man. And if this band gives her back, we are not a people. We are just shadows waiting to fade." He looked at Nalin. "Little Hawk died today. Do we honor his blood by surrendering, or do we honor it by standing?" Nalin lifted her head. She looked at Anna, then at Taza. She saw the way her son held the white woman's hand, not as a possession, but as a lifeline. "We do not trade lives," Nalin said softly. "We are Apache. We live free, or we die. We do not beg." The mood shifted. It was not a shift toward hope, but toward a grim, fatalistic resolve. They would not give her up. They would fight. The council broke up in silence. Later, in the privacy of their wickiup, the bravery evaporated. Taza collapsed onto the furs, burying his face in his hands. Anna sat beside him, the weight of the day crushing her. "Taza," she whispered, "you should have let me go." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Do not say that. Never say that. But am I a curse?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Kaya says I am. Maybe love. Maybe this love is a curse on your people. Maybe we were never meant to cross this line." Taza reached out and pulled her into his arms. He held her with a desperation that frightened her. "The world is full of curses. Anna," he said into her hair, "the soldiers are a curse. The starvation is a curse. The white men who take our land are a curse." He pulled back to look at her face. He traced the line of her cheekbone with his thumb. But this thing between us. He kissed her forehead, then her eyelids, then her mouth. This is the only thing in my life that is not a curse. It is the only thing that is clean. If I give you up, I become like them. I become a man who sells souls. He kissed her again, harder this time. I will not be that man. Their embrace turned fierce. It was a frantic, hungry thing. They pulled at each other's clothes, needing the contact of skin to prove they were still alive. Outside, the wind screamed and the snow fell, covering the blood of the boy they had buried. But inside, under the buffalo robes, they built a wall of heat and breath. They made love as if it were a form of warfare, a way to hold back the darkness for one more hour. Down in the valley, the fires of the army camp burned bright and orderly. Agent Meeks paced in front of his tent, his breath steaming. He was furious. The skirmish had been a mess. The girl hadn't run. She is Stockholm, Meeks muttered. Brainwashed, broken. Dorsey sat by the fire, cleaning his pistol. He was not furious. He was cold. Implacable ice. She ran to him, Dorsey said softly. She looked at me, and she ran to him. He snapped the cylinder of his revolver shut. I'm going to peel the skin off that Apache while she watches, Dorsey said to the fire. And then I am going to parade her through every town in the territory. I will put a collar on her if I have to. I will show everyone what happens when a white woman forgets who she belongs to. Meeks looked at the map. We have volunteers coming from Silver City. 50 men, plus the soldiers. Good, Dorsey said. Meeks tapped the map. We will hit them hard. No more skirmishes. We will surround the valley. We will bring up the mountain howitzers. We will wipe out the nest. Back in the high peaks. The days passed in a blur of tension. Every sound on the wind was a potential attack. Taza and Anna spent their evenings whispering, planning for a disaster they knew was coming. If they come from the south, Taza murmured, drawing lines in the dirt floor of the wickiup. Nalin will take the children up the goat path to the Needle Rocks. There are caves there, hard to find. And you? Anna asked. I will stay at the pinch point, with the men. We will buy them time. And me? Taza looked at her. You go with Nalin. You keep the children quiet. I want to stay with you, she argued. I can shoot. You go with Nalin. He insisted. If I fall, you must lead them. You know the white man's mind. You can negotiate if the end comes. It was a grim responsibility, but she accepted it. But in the quiet moments, when the planning became too heavy to bear, they let themselves drift into a different kind of talk, a dangerous talk. They talked of the north, of the lands beyond the territory, where the map was blank and the mountains were empty. There is a valley I heard of, Taza whispered in the dark. Far north, where the winters are long but the game is thick. No forts, no agents. We could build a cabin, Anna added, her voice dreamy and sad. Not a wickiup, a cabin with a door that locks, and a window. We could plant corn, Taza said, and a garden. They lay there, holding hands, constructing a life they knew they would likely never see. And perhaps, Taza hesitated, perhaps a child. Anna's breath hitched. A child. A child who would be half of the earth and half of the sky. A child who would belong to no one but themselves. A child who would be hunted, she whispered. A child who would be free. Taza corrected. He pulled her closer. Dream with me. Anna. The dream keeps us warm. So they dreamed. They built their cabin in the air while the army dragged cannons up the mountain passes below them. The contrast was a blade that cut them both. Every glance, every touch of hands while passing a waterskin. Every moment of shared silence was sharpened by the knowledge that it might be the last. The final storm was coming, and all they had to fight it with was a few rifles, a dwindling supply of ammunition, and a love that the world had decided was a capital crime. The dawn did not break. It bled into the sky. The valley, usually a bowl of silence at this hour, held a tension that made the air feel thin and brittle. The snow, crusted hard from the freezing night, crunched loudly under the boots of the sentries, a sound that seemed to carry for miles in the merciless, pale gray light. Taza stood near the lip of the ridge. his breath clouding in the freezing air. He did not need the scouts to tell him what the wind already carried. The smell of horse sweat, of gun oil, of men who had ridden hard through the night. "They are close," a scout named Jew whispered, appearing at Taza's elbow. "They come from the East Pass, and more from the lower creek. They have surrounded the mouth of the valley." "How many?" Taza asked, his eyes scanning the tree line. "Many," Jew replied. "Blue coats, and the men in dusters. Dorsey's men." Taza nodded once. It was the pincer movement they had feared. The Indian agent, Silas Meeks, had brought the hammer. Caleb Dorsey was the anvil. Taza turned back to the camp. It was a hive of controlled chaos. The decision had been made in the dark hours of the night. The warriors would stay. They would hold the line at the narrow neck of the valley. A choke point filled with fallen boulders and scrub pine. The women, the children, and the elders who could not fight would slip away up the goat path, a treacherous, icy sliver of a trail that wound up the sheer cliff face to the high peaks. Naylin was organizing the retreat. She moved with a fierce energy, her face set in lines of granite. She was bundling babies into cradle boards, checking water skins, and silencing whimpering children with a sharp look or a gentle touch. Anna stood by a roan pony, tightening the cinch. She was dressed in her heavy canvas coat, a cartridge belt slung over her shoulder, her hair braided tight against her head. She looked up as Taza approached. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the rifle in her scabbard. He looked at the determined set of her jaw. "Go with Nalin," Taza said. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. "The path is hard, but you are strong now. You can help them." Anna stopped working on the saddle. She turned to him. She took his hands, her fingers calloused and cold, and held them tight. "No," she said. Taza's eyes flashed with fear. "Anna, please. If the line breaks, I want to be where you are." She interrupted. She looked over his shoulder at the women climbing the trail. She saw Sani carrying her baby. She saw the old ones leaning on their walking sticks. "I have said my goodbyes," Anna said softly. "I bundled the children. I promised them they would be safe. I cannot keep that promise if I am running away while the wolves are at the door." She reached up and touched the scar on his cheek. "I am not a captive. Taza, I am not a victim. I am your wife, and my place is here, holding the wall." Taza looked at her for a long moment. He saw the steel in her spine. He saw the woman who had dragged a dying boy through the snow. He realized that denying her this choice would be the greatest insult he could offer. He nodded slowly. "Then keep your head down," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And save the last bullet for yourself. Do not let Dorsey take you alive." "I won't," she promised. A crack echoed from the lower valley. Then another. "Go!" Taza shouted to Nalin and the retreating column. "Move!" Naylin looked back once. Her eyes met Anna's. There was no judgment in them anymore, only a profound, sorrowful respect. She raised her hand in farewell, then turned and led her people into the mist and the stone. The first volley of rifle fire shredded the silence. Bullets slapped against the rocks, sending chips of stone and sprays of snow into the air. The valley floor, pristine white a moment ago, burst into red mist where a warrior named Chayton fell, caught in the open. Taza moved like a shadow. He slid behind a massive granite boulder, resting his Winchester on the mossy stone. He fired. The lever action of his rifle was a blur of motion. Down in the tree line, a soldier threw up his arms and fell backward into a drift. "Hold the left flank!" Taza roared. "Do not let them climb the scree!" Anna was crouched behind a fallen pine log, 10 yards to Taza's right. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her hands were steady. She checked the breech of her rifle. She peered over the bark. She saw them, blue uniforms moving through the trees, the glint of sunlight on metal, and among them, men in brown dusters, Dorsey's riders. She aimed at a shape moving toward Taza's blind spot. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. The shape crumpled. She did not feel triumph. She felt a cold, sick necessity. She chambered another round, the air filled with smoke and the scream of horses. The noise was deafening. The crack of gunfire, the shouting of men, the ricochet of lead whining off the canyon walls. Advance, push them back. The voice belonged to Silas Meeks. He was shouting from the rear, safely behind a wall of trees. He wanted a victory, but he did not want to bleed for it. But Caleb Dorsey did. Dorsey was advancing recklessly. He rode his horse until the terrain became too rough, then dismounted and charged on foot, a pistol in each hand. He was screaming Anna's name. He was a man possessed, driven mad by the injury to his pride. "Anna, come out," Dorsey bellowed, firing blindly at the rocks. "I know you are there." Taza heard him. He shifted his position, moving from rock to rock, drawing the fire away from Anna. He was the ghost the soldiers feared, appearing, firing, and vanishing before they could draw a bead on him. But the numbers were against them. There were too many soldiers. They were pushing up the slope, inch by inch. Near the center of the line, a tragedy unfolded. A child, a small girl of 6 winters who had slipped away from the retreating column in the confusion, came running back down the slope. She was crying, clutching for a doll she had dropped near the fire pit. "Get back!" Kaya shouted. Kaya was pinned down behind a cluster of scrub oak. He saw the girl running into the open. He saw the soldiers raising their rifles. Kaya did not hesitate. The hatred he had carried, the bitterness that had poisoned his heart, vanished in the face of the child's danger. He broke cover. He sprinted across the open ground, snow flying from his heels. He scooped the girl up just as a volley of shots rang out. Kaya grunted, stumbling. A bullet had caught him in the thigh. He fell, shielding the girl with his body. Anna saw it happen. She saw Kaya go down. She saw the soldiers advancing on them. "Cover me!" Anna yelled to Taza. She dropped her rifle and ran. She ran low, skidding on the ice. She reached Kaya and the girl. "Take her!" Kaya gasped, his face gray with pain. He shoved the girl toward Anna. Anna grabbed the child with one arm. She grabbed Kaya's collar with the other. "Get up!" she ordered. "Get up! Kaya!" She hauled him to his feet. He leaned on her, heavy and bleeding. Together, they stumbled back toward the cover of the rocks. Bullets kicked up snow around their feet. Taza stood in the open, firing rapidly, suppressing the soldiers to give them a chance. They fell behind the safety of a large boulder. Anna pushed the girl down, checking her for wounds. The child was terrified, but unharmed. She turned to Kaya. She ripped the scarf from her neck and tied it tight around his leg. Kaya looked at her. He looked at the white woman binding his wound, her hands stained with his blood and the dirt of the battle. He looked at the way she had run into the fire for an Apache child. "I was wrong," Kaya whispered, his voice trembling. "You are not a curse. Save your breath," Anna said, tightening the knot. "We are not done yet." The battle was closing in. The soldiers were at the edge of the rocks now. It was becoming a brawl. Dorsey had broken through the line. He scrambled over the fallen pine, his eyes wild. He saw Anna. "There you are," he snarled. He raised his pistol. Taza slammed into him from the side. The impact knocked the gun from Dorsey's hand. The 2 men went down in the snow, a tangle of limbs and fury. They rolled down the short slope, landing in a muddy depression near the frozen creek. Taza sprang up, cat-like. Dorsey scrambled to his feet, drawing a large Bowie knife from his belt. "You stole her!" Dorsey screamed, spit flying from his lips. "You filthy savage! You stole my property!" Taza did not draw his knife immediately. He stood with his hands open, his chest heaving. "She is not a horse." "Dorsey!" Taza shouted back. "She is a woman! She has a soul! She is white!" Dorsey yelled, lunging. "She belongs to her own kind." Taza sidestepped the lunge, grabbing Dorsey's wrist. He twisted, but Dorsey was strong. Fueled by a maniacal strength, they grappled, slipping in the slush that was turning pink with blood. Dorsey headbutted Taza. Taza stumbled back, blood streaming from his nose. Dorsey slashed. The blade cut a deep gash along Taza's ribs. Taza hissed in pain but did not fall. Anna watched from the rocks, her heart in her throat. She raised her rifle, but she could not fire. They were too close together. She might hit Taza. Dorsey charged again. I will kill you and drag her home on a rope." Taza drew his own knife. He met the charge. He ducked under Dorsey's swinging arm. He drove his shoulder into Dorsey's chest, knocking the wind out of him. "You will never touch her again," Taza whispered. Dorsey swung the heavy knife down. Taza caught the blow on his forearm, the blade slicing deep, but Taza did not let go. He drove his own knife upward. It was a brutal, ugly end. There was no glory in it, just the sound of steel hitting bone and the gasp of a man realizing his mortality. Dorsey froze. His eyes went wide. He looked down at the knife buried in his chest. He looked at Taza. Then he looked up at the rocks, at Anna. "Mine." He choked out, blood bubbling past his lips. He fell forward, face down in the frozen mud. He died reaching for a gun he could no longer hold. Taza stood over him, swaying. He dropped his knife. He pressed his hand to the wound in his side, the blood seeping through his fingers. On the ridge, the firing stopped. Agent Meeks lowered his binoculars. He saw Dorsey fall. He saw the piles of blue-coated bodies in the snow. He saw the ferocity of the remaining Apache warriors, who were now singing their death songs, preparing for the final charge. Meeks was a politician. He knew when a headline had turned into an obituary. "Pull back," Meeks shouted, his voice cracking. "Regroup! Fall back to the wagons!" "But sir," a lieutenant protested, "we have them! We have lost Dorsey!" Meeks yelled, "We have taken heavy casualties. I will not lose the whole command for one dead rancher. Retreat!" The bugles sounded. The notes were thin and wavering in the cold air. The soldiers, relieved to be leaving this valley of death, began to withdraw. They dragged their wounded with them, firing sporadic shots to cover their retreat. Silence returned to the valley, but it was not the peaceful silence of the dawn. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. The snow was churned into black mud. The air smelled of sulfur and copper. Anna scrambled down the slope. She ran to Taza. He was sitting on a rock near Dorsey's body, his head hanging low. He looked up as she approached. His face was battered, his eyes hollow. "It is done," he rasped. Anna fell to her knees beside him. She tore open his shirt. The cut on his ribs was deep, but it had missed the lung. The wound on his arm was ugly but clean. "You are alive," she wept. "You are alive." Taza looked at Dorsey's body. "He is dead," Taza said. "But the agent, he will write his papers. He will say we ambushed them. He will say we are monsters. They will come back. Anna, they always come back." The survivors of the band gathered in the clearing. They were a ragged group. Some were dead. Many were wounded. Their eyes were empty. The elders came down from the rocks once the soldiers were gone. They looked at the carnage. "We cannot stay here," an old man said, his voice shaking. "The army will return with cannons. We have no food. We have no ammunition. We must go to the reservation," another elder said. "It is a cage." "Yes, but in a cage, the children might live. Here, they will only freeze or burn." It was the end of the road. The fight had been fought, and though they had won the battle, the war was lost. Taza looked at Anna. He looked at the elders. "I cannot go to the reservation," Taza said quietly. The elders looked at him. They knew why. He had killed Dorsey. He was a marked man. If he went to the reservation, he would be arrested. He would be hanged. And she... Taza gestured to Anna. "If she goes down, the white world will take her. They will put her in an asylum or sell her to another man. They will not let us be." So, the choice was made. The band would surrender. They would go down to the agency and accept the beef and the blankets and the fences. They would survive, but they would change. But Taza and Anna would go north. It was a tearful parting. Under the skeletal branches of a lightning-struck pine, Anna hugged Nalin. The old woman held her tight, her bony hands pressing into Anna's back. "You are of my blood," Nalin whispered. "You are the daughter of my heart. Walk in the high places. I will never forget you." Anna sobbed. She turned to Kaya. He was leaning on a crutch made of a branch. He looked at her. Then he reached out and took her hand. "Ride fast," Kaya said. "The wind is behind you." Taza said his goodbyes to his people. He touched foreheads with the men he had fought beside. He knelt before his mother, letting her bless him one last time. Then he mounted his horse Anna mounted the roan mare. They carried very little: a rifle, a few blankets, a bag of dried meat, and each other. They did not look back at the Valley of Blood. They turned their horses toward the narrow trail that led up, past the timberline, toward the jagged peaks that marked the edge of the known world. They rode in silence for a long time. The wind cut sharp against their faces, but they did not feel the cold. They felt the weight of the future. "We will find it," Taza said, breaking the silence. "Find what?" Anna asked. "The quiet place, the valley where the water runs clear. We will build a cabin," Anna said, her voice growing stronger. "With a door," Taza added. "And a garden," she said. They rode close, their legs brushing against each other. The mountains stood dark and immense around them, indifferent to their plight, yet offering them shelter. They knew the world would never accept them. To the whites, she was a traitor. To the Apache, he was a ghost. They were exiles. But as they crested the final pass and looked out over the vast, white-capped horizon stretching north into the endless unknown, they did not feel lost. They had forged a bond in blood and fire. They had stripped away the lies of their cultures and found the raw, beating heart of something true. Taza reached out and took her hand. "Come," he whispered. Anna squeezed his hand. "I am coming." They kicked their horses forward, disappearing into the vast western landscape, harsh, unforgiving, yet holding hidden places where stubborn, forbidden love might root and grow. They rode into the white silence, together, with no guarantees except the fierce, enduring bond that was now their only law. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Taza and Anna. It has been a journey through the dust, the blood, and the snow, exploring the depths of a love that defied the boundaries of its time. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on the story. Did Taza and Anna make the right choice? If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to From Wild West for more stories of the frontier, where history and heart collide. Share your thoughts in English, and let's keep the spirit of the West alive together.